everyone. Chris Bennett here, you blockchain beard guy. Today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about private blockchains and some of the big conceptual differences between a public and a private blockchain. And this is going to be the first video in a new theme I want to add here on Blockchain Beard Guy, which is getting a little bit more education and discussion out there around private blockchains and blockchain for business using blockchain in enterprise scenarios. And I want to start focusing on this a little bit more for a few reasons. First of all, I think the community at large, when we think of blockchain, we tend to think of public blockchains, so things like Bitcoin or Ethereum. And private blockchains are a very different animal. The other reason I want to start talking about some of the differences and providing more education around private blockchain platforms like Hyperledger is because I really think that's going to be an area of tremendous growth in the blockchain space, at least in the short to mid-term. I see there being a lot more growth with blockchain for business than public blockchain solutions and platforms. So I think it's important to diversify the knowledge a little bit, get people to understand some of the key conceptual differences and how blockchain for business and private blockchains can really enable some amazing things in the enterprise. So to start out, when we think of a public blockchain, we're generally thinking of very, very large networks, massively distributed, and public blockchains have a few interesting properties. As we know, anonymity, or as much anonymity as is reasonable, is what a public blockchain tries to provide. So if you think about paying someone in Bitcoin or trading some Ether back and forth, these are generally scenarios where you're anonymous. We can go onto a blockchain explorer like etherscan.io. We can look at lots and lots of individual transactions, but the participants are anonymous. We can't tell who they are just by looking at a wallet address, even though we can see all the details of the transaction. And the primary asset being traded back and forth or exchanged is either a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin or Ether, or some kind of token or coin built on top of a platform such as Ethereum. So a utility token, an equity coin, something like that. And when you think about business scenarios, businesses have some very different requirements. First of all, anonymity in business is generally not a desirable thing or a thing that adds value. So if I wanted to use blockchain to help manage a supply chain relationship that I'm a part of, I may be a manufacturer and I want to use a blockchain platform so that I can share inventory information and levels with all my suppliers. They can supply me with what I need just in time, reduce cost, increase efficiency, lower production times. It's very important in scenarios like that I know who I'm doing business with, that I know which supplier supplied me with this last pallet of widgets. So unlike public blockchains, there really isn't a sense or a need for anonymity in private blockchains or blockchain for business. In fact, quite the opposite. And that leads to a second very interesting property of most private blockchains, especially platforms like Hyperledger, which is if I know who you are, if I have identity, and people, organizations, participants are no longer anonymous, well then I can create a permissions model on top of my solution. And I can control who has access to what kind of data, under what circumstances. I can create roles. So maybe it's important that I may be a manufacturer, I may have a supplier. We have a blockchain solution where the supplier can deliver supplies to my factory to be included in my manufacturing process. It's very important that both of us are able to update the ledger, but we may want to have a third-party auditor involved who simply reviews the information and points out any errors or inconsistencies. So for that third-party auditor, they don't necessarily need to be able to write transactions onto the ledger. They really just need to be able to read the ledger. And maybe we don't want to share all the ledger information with them. We just want to share a part. So this is where permissioning adds a lot of value. And it's really hard to think of any enterprise business-focused solution, whether it's blockchain or not, where having permissions, being able to define roles and abilities, and treating different groups of users differently from other groups of users is not an important thing or doesn't add a lot of value to the solution. Some other interesting things about business blockchains that are very different from public blockchains. So we are used to, in a public blockchain world, a transaction gets written to the ledger, written to the blockchain, and then once that block is ready to be mined, once the block is full, once it's time to come to consensus, the whole network then stops and validates that block as a whole. In private blockchains, it's very different because not every transaction on the ledger needs to be validated by all nodes or all participants on the blockchain. So for example, I have that factory, you might be one of my parts suppliers, but you're just one of many part suppliers that I have. So if another part supplier, if Barbara's Parts delivers some parts to my factory, you don't need to be a part of coming to consensus on that transaction. You don't need to help validate that transaction. The only transactions you need to help come to consensus on or help validate are ones that involve me and you. So you may deliver a truckload of parts to my factory today, and we could record that transaction in a smart contract that is only executed on my nodes and your nodes, not anybody else's. And if the result of that smart contract execution is the same on both sides, or we have a majority consensus, after consensus is reached, then we can add it to the ledger. So in private blockchains, you more often than not do not have things like proof of work, proof of stake, any kind of proof of algorithms, because that consensus is reached organically before information is written to the blockchain. Another interesting idea in private blockchains are the concepts of channels. So in a public blockchain, we have just one single ledger that's used by multiple different parties to record any and every kind of information. In a private blockchain, I may have one channel or one ledger that we use just for our vendor-supplier relationship. I may have a different channel that I use with a different supplier, and so there can be multiple different copies of a ledger out there, each ledger storing information about its participants and not sharing information with participants who aren't a part of that channel or that ledger. And then the final big difference between public and private blockchains is the idea of assets, and the assets can be tracked independently of transactions because assets may need to be mutable, they may need to be changed. So if I'm a auto manufacturer and I'm using blockchain to track the life cycle of my products, the vehicles that I make, from the time they are first created all the way to the time they go to the scrapyard and they're no longer vehicles anymore. Well, I can get a lot of value add out of that because all of a sudden I'm an auto manufacturer and I'm able to provide customers the same or better data than a company like Carfax. So it opens up new service avenues for me. But eventually that asset, that vehicle, is going to come to the end of its life, and it's not going to need to live on the blockchain anymore. So private blockchains incorporate this idea of a permanent immutable ledger along with traditional storage that can be changed, that can be edited, where records can be deleted. What's important is that at some point in the future, I can delete the record of that automobile because it no longer exists. But what may be permanent is every transaction that automobile went through. When was it manufactured? Which parts were used on it? Who was the first owner? Who was the second owner? Did it have flood damage? Things like this. So those are just some high-level differences. Like I said, in future videos, I'm going to continue to dive into this deeper and deeper and educate you all a little bit more about private blockchains and blockchain in business. Because again, I think there's just tremendous growth opportunity there. And if you want to learn more about a private blockchain and how it might be able to benefit your business, let me know. Leave a comment, shoot me a message. I'd love to talk to you a little bit more about how a private blockchain might be able to benefit your business and work with you to help design a really cool solution that can enable your business to be a lot more effective and efficient than your competition. So I hope you guys are having a great day. I hope you're loving blockchain world as much as I am. Until next time, this is Chris Bennett, your blockchain beard guy, and I'll see you guys soon.